We break down the top 10 WHLers of the 2024 NHL Draft, along with some honorable mentions who just missed the cut on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the top 10 WHLers of the 2024 NHL Draft, along with 3 honorable mentions who just missed the cut. It's a tight gap, personally, between 10 and 15. But we'll break that down. I'm Hattie Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High, and we'll get this done right away for you. Before we get into that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $200 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to rate and review. It helps the channel out a lot. Make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's start with the honorable mentions, Sebastian. Who do you got there as your 3 honorable mentions outside the top 10?
I've got 3 big boys here, going all sides with my HMs here. So starting off with Charlie Elick, who had a very good performance at the top prospects game, and got me to take a closer look at him yesterday in terms of his WHL tape, and I thought it was quite solid. He's very dependable. He's consistent. Like, you know what you're getting with Charlie Elick. He's not going to go end-to-end solo rushing, but he's quite an effective transition defender. I like the way he's able to use his reach to close gaps and to take up a lot of space defensively. And he's been quite interesting in my passing viewing so far this season, and continuing the trend with very big players with very long reaches. We have Adam Yeko as well, who's been quite a staple in the first round rankings in terms of NHL Central Scouting and overall NHL affiliated rankings, apart from Bob McKenzie's, which I think was a bit perplexing to us both from what we've seen of Yeko, which has been solid, but far from spectacular. Like he's a solid complementary right winger. I like the way that he's able to use his physicality and size and reach to kind of protect possession, to achieve possession, to kind of win board battles, but also I've seen him get some nice takeaways in terms of on the back check and using his reach to really disrupt play in that facet. But he's very much a bread and butter big winger. And I think that he's a bit limited in terms of dynamism or playmaking and handling ability, which will probably keep him from being an impactful top end of the lineup type of player. But there's definitely some fourth line and third line upside here with the size and with the physical tool specifically, which I like. And lastly, I've got a player that I don't think you were quite able to squeeze into your list, but I was able to squeeze into mine, in Julius Miettinen of the Everett Silvertips, who's a player that has been all over my radar in the last week since I stumbled across him in a passing viewing when I was watching Terrence Smith, who was a teammate of his, and I quite like him. He's a decent goal scorer. The analytics are rough. He's not necessarily a high-end possession winger just yet, but there's an array of tools that I find quite interesting. He's really quite quick when he gets some speed going. I think he was the fastest player in just the straight-on sprint of in the CHL top prospects game. He's quite big. He's at 6'3", 207 pounds. He's really good around the net front, quite capable at tipping pucks and getting to rebounds quickly and stopping at the net front. He has a variety of pro-level habits that I find quite impressive, and he's on a real tear recently with 8 goals and 16 points in his last 10 games. So I thought I've seen enough from him to get him into my slot here as an HM. But who do you have for your HMs?
Yeah, I mean, Julius Miettinen is a player who I ranked in my top 64, is actually the 64th player in my rankings. So he's technically ranked. but that still leaves him outside of my honorable mentions. That's how good this WHL class is. We'll start off with the first two that you mentioned, Charlie Elick and Adam Yeko, are exactly the first two honorable mentions on my
There
list.
we go.
And both of them are ranked. I have Adam Yeko. Let me check. I have Adam Yeko at 48 and Charlie Elick at 49. In my honorable mentions, and they're both really good players, like you mentioned. I think Yeko has been playing mostly at the wing in the last couple of weeks. I think the main issue with Yeko is just skating. It's going to hold him back a lot, but we're talking about a 6'5", 200-pound winger. Usually you have trouble getting around at that age, at that size. But it's also just, I don't think he really thinks the game at an advanced level. Is pretty straightforward in his mindset in terms of hockey sense. And kind of the same goes for Charlie Elick, except Elick, I'd say, is a better skater, definitely.
Yeah.
Covers a lot of ice, and just the range that he's able to cover in a quick, in a relatively small amount of time, on defense is fairly good. But I don't really see the offensive instincts beyond, timing his shots well from the point. So I'm still not sold on Elick. I've seen him in the first round. But another player I have who's actually a South African citizen, Harrison Brunicki, another big right-handed defenseman. I think he's more mobile than Elick. He's definitely got a bit more pop to his edge work and his skating. And he's got a very interesting tool bag where he's able to stick handle really well from the point as well. I mean, I've seen him go to his backhand really comfortably and make plays from his backhand, which you rarely see from draft eligible defensemen. And he's been fairly good for Kamloops, just not overwhelming enough to kind of leapfrog those two. For me, Brunicki is 55th overall. And is the first player of the final tier of my top 64, I'd say. So, he's still in the conversation, but still definitely an honorable mention. And Julius Miettinen is in the same tier as Brunicki, but 10 spots lower. I'm still not really sold on him either. All right, so let's get into the top 10 now. I think we can start at 10th overall here. And my player is Clarke Caswell. I think he's been really, really good. And
Mine too.
perfect. Fantastic. Yeah. Great defensive player. Really works well in transition. He's a bit frail, I would say. He's pretty easy to kind of knock off the puck. And there's a reason he's literally one spot above Adam Yeko and Charlie Elick, which is why I said that this is kind of a tight range of players. But for me, Charlie Elick's defensive ability combined with his playmaking is a really good 1-2 punch of abilities. And I've seen some decent flashes of kind of really hard wristers, like surprisingly accurate wristers that he's been able to fool goaltenders with. So I think the offensive toolkit is pretty interesting. And he also has a fallback game as a kind of more defensive, undersized, but really good defensive kind of skating winger. So I think there's decent value there. But yeah, what's your assessment of him as well? Like, where do you stand on Clarke Caswell's potential?
I think it's quite similar to what you were just saying. Like, I think he's a solid bet for like a second to third round value come draft day. But what makes him really fun in my eyes is just like the offensive creativity too. Like there's definitely an element of creativity and dynamism that is quite enjoyable in this player, but there's still a lot that has to kind of come together for that to project as being a potential dynamic player at the NHL level. Like there has to, as you said, a lot of physicality has to come back that up. I think he has to really get a sturdier base to not be pushed off of pucks so easily, and to be a little bit more determined in terms of accessing the middle of the ice. He can be pushed to the perimeter in some of my viewings, which is something to note. But the skill level, the playmaking, the quick processing, and the desire to make an impact in all three zones is all very enjoyable and things that I value a lot from a scouting perspective. And he's definitely fun.
Absolutely. And we go to 9th overall. I've got Miguel Marques, who has been...
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, this is starting off
There we
great.
go.
But yeah, Miguel Marques is really interesting because he's been playing in a lesser touted program in Lethbridge. It's not really going too well for them overall standings wise, but Marques has been really good on this poor team. I mean, he's a player who loves to cut to the middle, is a real poacher off the puck as well, loves to find space. He loves to shoot in motion as well. Doesn't really stop his feet when catching pucks and making plays. And there's a decent gap between Caswell and Marques for me now. I have Miguel Marques just shy of the first round at 33rd overall. So that tells you kind of how much I like this player. He's, like I said, really, really lethal below the dots. He's able to rifle the puck and can do it in multiple ways. So his goal scoring ability is definitely going to be his bread and butter at the next level. But I've still seen decent enough flashes of playmaking and defensive ability that I'm not too worried about him translating. It's just he's not always there effort level wise, and his team isn't really I mean, he's not well surrounded, so he's having to do a lot of heavy lifting offensively, and yeah, he's been good so far. But that wraps things up for our first segment. So we have the first two of the top 10, just down pat, the exact same. We'll get into our second segment here and talk about the top 8 and how we have these players ranked. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sundays are all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I personally always enjoy the ads and the creativity behind them on Super Bowl day, but what I enjoy even more is going for a nice old single game parlay. Specifically for me, it's going to be nice and chill because my favorite team is not playing the Super Bowl as per usual, but I'll be able to relax and just enjoy the action a little bit more without being too anxious for this special game. New customers, if they join today, will get $200 in free bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to sign up. That is fanduel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Alrighty, so let's go through picks 8 through 5 now in our top 10 breakdown of the best WHLers for the 2024 NHL Draft. The Western Hockey League's been really, really good in the last 2 years, and this year's no exception. There are a decent glut of really good players. So let's start at 8th overall. Who's your player?
Carter Yakemchuk. Is that the same one that you have?
No, I actually might have him flipped.
We have variants.
We have our first difference. All right, so that's fantastic.
Finally.
Talk me through why Carter Yakemchuk is your 8th guy.
On the one hand, there were 4 guys that had to rank here that are entirely in the same glut of players for me. Like I've not gotten the same amount of WHL viewings this season that you've gotten, so like there's definitely a lot less room between these players from my perspective at this point in the draft cycle, which will hopefully shift pretty soon when I get another round of viewings in. But
For sure.
Carter Yakemchuk is a player that has a plethora of really exciting offensive tools, and I think he makes a lot of sense for teams in the late first round and even like late to mid first round, especially if you're looking for really toolsy right shot defenseman and you trust your development staff. He makes a ton of sense. He's a really strong puck handler. He's really aggressive. He's big. He can be strong. He has a wicked shot that he just spams, but the tool is there. He needs to still learn how to fully use it for it to be very effective rather than just a habit. But he's fascinating. He makes mistakes. He tries things. He has a level of maybe not creativity, but a desire to try new things that I really appreciate, that I like a lot. But there's still a lot of refinement that's really lacking in this game that I would like to see before I feel comfortable ranking him anywhere near my top 20. Yeah. But the tools are really fun, and he's one that I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on for the rest of the draft cycle, because with his toolkit, I could easily see him jump up into my top 20 if the habits refine and the overall projection becomes a little bit more cohesive for his toolkit.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, he's not far ahead of you. I mean, my 8th overall pick is going to be Tanner Howe out of the 2024 class of the WHL prospects. Tanner Howe is, for me, this year's Brendan Gallagher. He's very feisty, very aggressive on forechecks. Loves to make play inside contact, loves to drive the net and just bang goals in. There's a reason he's the captain of the Regina Pats as an 18-year-old. Like, he is very mature in his play style, and he has this contagious level of energy and motor that just brings everyone up a notch when he goes into a corner, head first to win a board battle and does it against like a 6'3", 6'4" defenseman. That kind of pumps you up as his teammate. It makes you want to put in more effort. These types of players that have this mindset, that have the mental element of the game down pat, and have the effort level of and energy to go a whole game doing that specific thing, those players, I think, are underrated in terms of their quality. But I like Carter Yakemchuk a bit more than Tanner Howe. So I have Tanner Howe at 29th overall, and Carter Yakemchuk has worked his way up to 25th overall in my rankings. So Yakemchuk is a player who, at the start of the year, I was having a hard time watching him because like he gives you headaches. Like, he's not an easy player to enjoy scouting, because I put myself in a coach's shoes for a second, and I mean, I'm already investing in Rogaine, like that's the kind of thing that he makes it really difficult he ramps up the play. That's what he does. Regardless what happens, he tries to bomb a puck up the ice. He tries to stick handle his way out of the defensive zone on the breakout and just carry it the whole way and kind of deke through opponents. He spams shot from the blue line. Like he's always trying to intensify play, which is, I like my defenseman to have a bit more chess, but I like the tools and the mindset enough in combination that I think that he can still become a decent player. But there's a lot of refinement that's needed, and you need the right people in the right places in your development team to get the best out of Yakemchuk. But I think that overall the upside is a bit more interesting with Yakemchuk. And the downside is a bit worse, I'd say, than Tanner Howe. Like Tanner Howe is definitely an NHLer. But I still like enough what Yakemchuk brings to put him just a notch ahead of Tanner Howe. They're in the same tier for me, but yeah, I mean, I'm guessing Tanner Howe's not far ahead, right, for you?
He's up at 5th, but again, it is a
Oh,
really tight tier. It is for me a stylistic preference over the 2 other players I have behind him.
yeah,
Starting off with Ryder Ritchie at 7, who I liked a lot more in my early viewings of this draft cycle than more recent ones. Like he's been injured since mid-December, so we haven't gotten viewings in the last 1.5 months that are new.
yeah,
But from what I saw earlier on this season, the puck handling is just so exceptional. Like he has difficulty catching pucks on the hard passes, but when the puck is on a stick and he's in possession, there's a real fluidity with his motion. Like he has like really flexible wrists. He's constantly getting the puck into areas that makes it really difficult for defensemen to strip him of possession.
yeah,
He's very good at protecting possession in a very like flary and fun way, which makes him a lot of fun to watch. But it can be a little bit frustrating because there can be a lack of substance to his plays in that style where
yeah,
it looks at times like he's just trying to do the pretty play rather than any effective play. And
yeah,
that's something that I've definitely noticed. But he's an August 3rd birthday, so he's very young for the draft class, and understandably has a little bit more of a learning curve in terms of like more refined habits than a lot of the other WHLers that we're talking about here in this episode. So I can totally understand why people still have him up in their top like 10, top 15. But from what I've seen, there's a lot of things that scare me a little bit with his projection,
yeah.
and I'm curious to see how he looks when he comes back from injury. But for the time being, is very much in that glut of players that I have ranked from the WHL between 20 and 30.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of the same vein that I'm on with Ryder Ritchie at 6th overall
There we go.
among WHL prospects. So it's not far ahead of you. I have some concerns with the details of his game, but overall, I think that when he decides to scan, when he decides to check his surroundings, and when he has the puck on his stick, flat and in control, there are very few players that can do what Ryder Ritchie does. So I'm still torn on him, but he slipped down my rankings and is now I think at 21st, 22nd rather. And the fifth player in my rankings is actually the player I have at 21st, which is Terik Parascak. I'm guessing you have him at 6th overall, though, right?
Indeed, I do.
That's right. I mean, I have such a hard time not loving Terik Parascak. For me, he's one of the smartest players in the draft and makes decisions on a regular basis that just get you out of your seat. So I'm sold on the mindset. He's such a bad skater that it's almost definitely going
Yeah.
to limit him from being a top 20 pick, but he's just on the edge of it for me. And then the same tier that goes from 16 to 22 for me. Like he's in that conversation. If you can get him on a team that knows how to develop skating properly, I'm terrified of what Terik Parascak could become, because the smarts with the shot, with the playmaking, with the advanced anticipation of the game, lethal. I mean, lethal. But I'm guessing you have him at 6, right?
Indeed, I do. But again, it is such a tight tier. I just had 4 names and I had to rank them in some order. So
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to add a little bit of spice to my rankings because I figured that Parascak would kind of headline this tier of players for you.
Yeah.
And much as I love the intelligence and the passing ability specifically, which just stands out in every single viewing of mine,
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Tanner Howe. I like Tanner Howe. I went with him over Parascak, not because I think that he's like in a tier above by any stretch of the imagination, but
Yeah.
what I love with Tanner Howe is just how projectable his role currently is. He's
Yeah.
already a leader on his team, but he's playing a style of hockey that is going to make an impact against NHL competition. And of course, he has to refine a lot of his habits and his overall toolkit until he's there. He's not going to be a shoe-in for an NHL role as a D+1 by any stretch of the imagination. But the intensity, the grit, the scoring ability from in tight, the ability to get a ton of elevation on pucks when he is right around the crease, the one-touch playmaking ability, which I think is quite underrated with him because he is a really solid and intelligent player. And while the playmaking isn't perhaps full of flair, like you might see with guys like Ryder Ritchie or Terik Parascak, it's really effective. He makes the simple plays, but he's able to find the important passes when he is in the high danger areas in the offensive zone. And he's far from the most like fluid player in the world. He's not going to blow you away with skill and overall high level abilities that project as like first line level. But I'm a very big fan of how he projects as a middle six piece, and a highly versatile middle six piece at that. I think he can play in like any forward role. You just need him slot in. There's a lot of value in that, and I think that the floor with him, as you mentioned earlier, is a lot higher than some other players in this tier.
Makes sense for sure. But that wraps us up for a second segment. Now we'll get into the top 4 WHL prospects of the 2024 NHL Draft right after these messages from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's close things off with the top 4 prospects of the 2024 NHL Draft crop of WHL players. So let's get into it at 4th overall. I don't know how you stand on these 2 players that are at 3rd or 4th, but I had a hard time separating them. But my 4th overall prospect in the among WHLers for the 2024 NHL Draft is Andrew Basha, the first of 2 Medicine Hat Tigers in this top 4. And for me, just the epitome of pace. He just does everything at a high speed, and kind of reminds me a bit of Oliver Moore at times when I watch him. Like, I think that just not just in terms of the overall playing style, but also just the skating technique, the skating style that he has. Both of them skate really fast with really good edge work, but don't do it without effort. They're like pushing it, right? And I think that Basha's combination of skating and playmaking ability can really work at the NHL level. I'm not really sold on the shot being like a plus tool yet. But where do you stand on Andrew Basha? Is he also your 4th prospect, or?
I'm pretty sure we're going beat for beat here in the top 4. I don't think there's going to be a single difference in our rankings here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have Basha as well at 4. I've been, as you said, a massive fan of the pace. Like the overall ability in transition is a standout strength and has really helped him be a tremendous compliment to Cayden Lindstrom, who we're definitely going to be talking about a little bit later on in this segment.
Oh, yeah.
But Basha's strength is really as a puck carrier with pace through the neutral zone, get into the offensive zone, and then look for options. And he's really been able to refine his playmaking ability as the season has progressed, because he's been playing with a player of the caliber of Cayden Lindstrom, which is certainly a good motivator to work on your playmaking ability and on a consistent basis. And Basha is one of the older players in this draft class, or like not oldest, but he's a November birthday, so he's definitely a lot more refined than other players in this tier, especially compared to like Ryder Ritchie, who stands out as quite raw as a high upside WHLer. But with Andrew Basha, you're getting a player who just, as you said, relentless pace. He doesn't bring the same like defensive intelligence that Oliver Moore brings to the game, or the comfort playing down the middle, which is certainly a big difference compared to the projection with Oliver Moore. And I think that the playmaking upside's a little bit less, a bit less strong compared to Oliver Moore's, who I think was quite underrated in terms of his playmaking intelligence last season. But he's a fascinating player. Like Basha's been a solid player in my 15 to 25 range all draft, like ever since I got my first couple of viewings in, and he is just red hot. Before he went, or not, he's back from injury, of course. Nice, it's good to see. But in his last 10 games, he's been red hot, which includes like a break in those 10 games with his injury. But he has only 3 goals in those 10 games, but 19 points. So I think I'm definitely with you in my viewings. The goal scoring hasn't been a massive strength, but the playmaking ability has just been consistently growing, and is certainly reasons for optimism for like potential top 6 upside long term.
Absolutely. And then at 4th overall, we have Tij Iginla, I think is
Third.
going to be. Oh, sorry. Yeah, third overall. We have Tij Iginla, Jerome Iginla's son, and a really, really good hockey player outside of that. I mean, he's not just like the son of a Hall of Famer. He's an actual fantastic player when you watch him.
He
And
good.
he started off for me. I mean, I watched him last year with Seattle and I saw a complimentary kind of, bottom six grinder who can score some goals. But, once he moved to Kelowna and started playing with Andrew Crystal, it was very clear that he not only has the hockey sense to keep up with Andrew Crystal, but he also has an untapped amount of playmaking ability. He's been finding Crystal all over the ice. He's making plays into areas for him to skate into. The two of them have been combining for really, really good results in Kelowna overall. And Tij Iginla has definitely kind of separated himself from the pack for me here at third. Even as much as I like Andrew Basha, and as much as I think there's still a reasonable amount of closeness between the two, Iginla's just overall offensive versatility combined with his hockey sense is going to be lethal at the next level. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets picked up by Calgary at like 10th overall or 9th overall or something like that if they stay in this range. It would be a really good fit. But then we move to second overall, and this is where it gets interesting at 1 or 2 because there's a lot of debate all over the scouting sphere between this. Guys who follow the WHL religiously have Berkly Catton over Cayden Lindstrom. And there's other guys that I've talked to that also follow the WHL religiously that haven't flipped around. A lot of NHL teams, a lot of official rankings have Cayden Lindstrom ahead of Berkly Catton, and I think we're both on that page so far, right? I think Lindstrom barely edges out Catton in this conversation.
There are such tremendously different players that I can
Yeah,
very much understand why it has been such a debate because it's far more in terms of like philosophically debating which player you think is more valuable. Like, is it
yeah,
the insanely high octane dynamic forward in Berkly Catton, or is it the insanely well-rounded and dominant center in Cayden Lindstrom? And
yeah,
I think that the confidence in the positional projection with Lindstrom plays a small role. I think the fact that he is such a versatile player in the offensive zone as a puck handler, a goal scorer, and a playmaker, whether he's on or off puck, he makes a consistent difference. You can rely on him to just dominate entire sequences in the offensive zone against junior competition, and he does it
yeah.
with seeming ease. There's this ease to his game that I think that has really entrenched him for me as a top WHLer. Like I haven't personally seen it as a massive argument with myself in this draft cycle just yet. Like Cayden Lindstrom is sitting at 3 on my personal board at the moment, but that he's been jumping between 3 and 5 for the last couple months, whereas
Yeah.
Berkly Catton is like very much still fighting his way into my top 6, top 7 conversation.
Yeah.
Just because it's really tight in that range. I think the middle of the top 10 in this draft class, there's a lot of value and a lot of very different styles that makes it interesting to rank because it is very much philosophical, even more so than like last draft year was. Like I think like last year there's very clear like separation in tiers inside
Yeah.
the top 10, which this year is a lot more fluid,
Yeah.
and the Lindstrom and Catton debate is certainly part of that fluidity.
Oh, for sure. And, I think both of them are versatile offensively. I think that Catton is also a very good playmaker, stick handler, and goal scorer. I just think that Lindstrom is so inside driven, is so
Yeah.
consistently looking to create advantages on the puck, and also has an insane amount of defensive value. Like, he's a really good defensive player, extremely hard forechecker, extremely hard back checker, defensively aware, good positioning, good stick work, and you add on top of that the drastic size difference. I mean, Lindstrom has 6 inches on Berkly Catton. Like that's a big difference of size. And as much as I'm not sure how reliable the 6'5", 205 evaluation is of Lindstrom, I still think that like you can see it on the ice. Like these are two completely differently built players.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I think that Lindstrom has a skill set that reminds me a lot of Quinton Byfield. And Quinton Byfield took some time to reach his ceiling, but he's there now and it's looking really, really good. Berkly Catton has a lot of comparables to me, but I see him very much more as a purely offensive, purely dynamic player. I don't think you're going to get much
Yes.
out of him defensively. And overall, it's just, again, it's a philosophical difference about do you prefer the well-rounded player is going to get you between 70 and 85 points a year in his prime, or do you prefer the pure offensive dynamo that could get you 100, 110 points at a ceiling? Like it's just, and we're talking obviously about ceilings, about pure potential, about everything going right. But like for me, Cayden Lindstrom has just too many different possibilities in terms of where he ends up and what he ends up doing. Um, that it's really difficult to leave him out of, the top rank between those two guys. So I think we both agree on that. Cayden Lindstrom, in our eyes, is the best prospect of the WHL class of the 2024 NHL Draft. Now, this wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And make sure to make us your first listen of the day if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform. And please leave us a rate and review. Let us know what your thoughts are about the podcast. It helps the channel out a lot. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. Make sure to tune in next week as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of February. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.